Hello and welcome to the Personal Record Podcast. I'm your host, Timothy Clark. Thank you all very much for joining us. We find ourselves in some strange times right now. There's obviously an epidemic going on throughout the country, and no more so than here in New York City, which is where the Personal Record Podcast is based. And so a lot of my friends have been struggling with what they can and can't do in terms of their fitness level, in terms of just their sanity, in terms of being able to go outside indoors to the parks. I know Governor Cuomo has been pretty vocal about what he has seen in the past weeks in terms of people not exercising their social distance and whatnot. And so today's guest is actually somebody that I think can help shed a lot of light on the situation that we find ourselves in right now. This is New York City Parks Commissioner Mitchel Silver. Mitchel was the former chief of planning for Raleigh, North Carolina, taught graduate planning courses at the Harvard Graduate School of Design, as well as here at Hunter College, Brooklyn College, and the Pratt Institute. He was also was elected a fellow in 2016 to UK's Academy of Social Sciences. And again, we are extremely proud to have Commissioner Mitchel Silver of the New York City Parks Department here with us today to help shed some light on some of what's going on here in New York City, and hopefully we can all walk away with a little bit more understanding about what options we do and don't have available to us as athletes and just as people who are trying to navigate such a difficult time. So, Commissioner, thank you very much for joining us, and welcome to the Personal Record Podcast.
Well, thank you, Timothy. So glad to join you.
Again, it is our pleasure, and thank you very much for taking your time. I'm sure it's been very busy for you the last several weeks. So, as I said, Governor Cuomo has been pretty vocal about what he has seen in New York City, and I know you have kind of shared his thoughts on that in terms of what was going on specifically in Central Park and Prospect Park. I know a lot of people are getting a little bit they're getting some cabin fever and they're looking for places to go. And some of the few places that they can go are our New York City parks. So can you talk a little bit about what you've been seeing and what changes have been implemented in order to keep people safe, keep them healthy?
Well, first, both the mayor and the governor work together. And so as these changes come from the governor, the mayor then sits down and we determine what we have to do to respect the governor's new orders. In terms of what people can do, parks are open. And so we encourage people to go out for exercise. So it's certainly you are home, you want to go out and exercise, but when you're done exercising, go home. That's very important. We don't want people to linger. We know these are some trying times. As you said, people get cabin fever, but parks are open, get your exercise, and then go home. When you're outside, we're encouraging people to stay at least 6 feet apart. I'll get to runners and bikers and pedestrians in a second. But in terms of what is open, parks are open for the time being. Skate parks are open. We have dog runs are open. Certain athletic fields are open. Virtually everything else is closed. And so that order just came in a few days ago to close all playgrounds. That we're now putting all of our signs. And throughout our park system, you'll see yellow signs for warning saying no group play. We're encouraging solitary exercise. And then there are the red signs when something actually is closed. So the parks are open. Runners, of course, it's a little bit different because they run whether it's greenways, trails, or loops in parks. And then I can get in some specific guidance. But for all of our runners out there, things always change. We encourage you to go on our website, either follow Parks Department on Twitter at @NYC Parks, or you can go to and just Google New York City Parks, and you'll see all the restrictions and service cancellations if you really want to stay up to date. But again, it changes daily. As we see people not complying with social distancing, rules change. And so the public knows we have enforcement agents out there. There's a police department, the Parks Department, and we have several other agencies that are basically doing enforcement to make sure people are social distancing. And we get reports every day, and that's what guides the mayor in terms of what we have to do to close other elements.
Right. Mayor de Blasio said they're actually going to be, NYPD is going to be issuing tickets, right, to people that aren't complying?
Correct, as well as our Parks Enforcement Patrol. The Parks Department basically has peace officers that can also issue violations. And so to answer your question, yes, both NYPD as well as what we call them PEP, our Parks Enforcement Patrol, also have the ability to issue violations for non-compliance.
Okay, so you mentioned...
So we're taking this very, very seriously. We do monitor and do daily calls about what we're seeing out there. So folks, we're encouraging you, please social distance. We don't want you to spread to affect others. So this is a very, very serious matter.
Yeah, I think the message that has been coming from the leadership in the city and in the state has been pretty consistent and pretty effective. I think from what I've noticed here in New York City is that people have actually been, I think the majority of people were listening right away, and then there were some people like the younger people who didn't listen quite immediately. But everyone's starting to catch on, and you're starting to see less and less people around, less and less people in the parks. I did go for a run in Central Park early on, and I remember looking around thinking about as busy as I've ever seen the park, which again is it makes sense in that you have 8 million people in New York City, almost 9 million people in New York City. Instead of them spreading out throughout the city as they normally would on any day-to-day basis, they're all looking for somewhere to go. And where do you go? You go to Central Park, you go to Prospect Park, you go to our other parks.
Right.
So you mentioned that that runners, you had some advice for runners in particular. My question to you is running, even if you're running with other people, is the fact that you're moving, does that play a role in the contagiousness of the disease, of the virus, or not? Or what other advice do you have for runners in particular?
Well, I want to be careful. I'm not a health expert. What we are telling everyone, if you're running together, run at least 6 feet apart. It's better to do it one behind the other than side by side, because now on loops, people are running both directions. It can get a little congested, and then you have walkers. So it's very hard, if you're in Central Park or Prospect Park, end up running into the bike lane, which could be dangerous. So it's better if you're going to run with someone. Clearly, we don't want certain people who feel unsafe to run by themselves. So if you want to run with someone, make sure they're at least a minimum of 6 feet behind you or in front of you. We're now encouraging people, based on the mayor's message yesterday, to wear covering. Runners have buffs, so I'm now starting to run with a buff. It's going to get warmer, so it'll be a bit of a challenge. But we want to take all those precautions, not just for you, but for others. And so those are some of the recommendations that I would give. I also encourage people to run off peak. I'm now coming to work still. I work in Central Park. On weekends, I run in Prospect Park. So I'm now running midday. And I now see a big change. A couple of weeks ago, no, people weren't social distancing. Our runner was blowing by me about a foot and a half away. That's not cool. We cannot do that. When you pass people, pass at least 6 feet away. And particularly if they're coming towards you, we have to pay more attention. I'm encouraging runners, just like you're driving, run to the right if people are going in both directions, not in the middle. So that way you're giving people proper space to distance. But run off peak, discover some of those trails and places in New York that are not as heavily congested. But midday, we're not seeing a lot of people in Central Park. Evening, you see more. And then we encourage people early morning or off peak. Runners also the weather doesn't bother us. I mean, when it's a rainy day, we're out there running. The other day it was misting. We loved it. It's great. So there are less people outdoors when it's running and it's misty. So I encourage runners, just don't change your pattern, but just make sure you maintain that social distance. I recommend you run to the right. So when people are coming in the other direction, they're running to the right so you can do their proper distance. Don't run in the middle of the road, which now forces someone to run into a bike lane or makes them uncomfortable.
Very good advice. Is there any word on, and I don't know to what extent you would know this, is there any word on how this could or might affect the New York City Marathon in November?
We don't know. Clearly, we're working with Roadrunners, one of our key partners, and we have a license agreement with them. They're monitoring all their runs. It's too early to say at this point. Our hope is that we'll be able to flatten the curve and that things will get back to somewhat normal sometime possibly in the summer. But again, I'll rely on the experts about how long this can last. We're in contact with all of our licensees and all of the groups we work with for our special events. We have a call at least twice a week. Some have to order supplies right now and have to make a decision now. So it's something we're doing on a regular basis so that they're in the know and we're in the know. But it's unpredictable. Listen to the governor, the mayor for that guidance.
Yeah, this would be that'd be pretty disappointing for a lot of people. But again, something that New York Roadrunner has dealt with in the past, and so I'm sure there's some sort of plan that they have in place. Friends of mine work for Roadrunner, and work with Roadrunner in other capacities, and the extent to which they plan and allow for disaster type scenarios is pretty incredible. They're really a rampart in terms of that in terms of like planning for worst case scenarios. So can you talk a little bit about your running background? My introduction to you was through Amy Freeze, who was a guest of the show. And she mentioned to me, actually, a long way before this happened, that you were a longtime runner and that you have recently ran your first New York City marathons, plural, if I'm not mistaken. Just one, two. Okay, two. And so, yeah, so just tell us a little bit about your background. And again, this was a conversation I wanted to have well before the coronavirus epidemic. But, again, the situation changed. And again, you just were well suited to speak with regarding today's troubles.
Well, I ran most of my life. I ran in elementary school is when I started, probably seventh grade, then ran competitively in high school and then in college. After college, it was running off and on, maybe a 5K, a 10K, but it wasn't consistent. It was really a change back in 2008 when I really started running again. My brother died very tragically at the age of 49. We ran together, and it was very difficult to get over his passing. And about 6 months after going to therapy and not finding a cure, I said, wait a minute, he's a runner. He was a runner, I'm a runner, and I started running to feel connected with him. And that's when I started picking it up again, more so for therapy and running with him. In fact, my first marathon was dedicated to my brother Sam. And so that really helped me focus and get through difficult times and fell in love with running again. When I came to New York and I took this job, it was quite intense, really didn't find the time to run as much as I wanted to, and started developing some health issues. I went to a doctor. That was now in 2014. And he asked me, is it okay if I'm be honest with you? And I said, well, absolutely. And he basically said, if you keep it up at this pace, you maybe have a couple of years to live. Every sign from my blood test was just scary. So he said, change your diet, start exercising now. And it scared me. I was in my mid-50s. And I said, wait a minute, I'm in New York. My brother and I ran together in Prospect Park and decided to start first walking, then running. I remember the first time I ran 1 mile. I lived near Fort Greene Park. I couldn't even get up that slope. And I'm like, what happened to me? And from there on.
It's a tall slope. That's a tall park.
It is. So, I couldn't believe I had to stop. And it's only like 2 blocks. And I said, wow, this is going to be hard. So to make a long story short, dropped about 15 pounds. And then along the way, one of my best friends from college, April Cargill, we bumped into each other. I'm going out with her for dinner and didn't even realize she's a runner until we saw each other at a race. And then she introduced me to a group called Harlem Run. So I was doing 5Ks, 10Ks. And so it took me about 6 months because I said, I don't do groups. I'm a solo runner. And so I went to Harlem Run one Monday night and fell in love with running with groups. And from that point on, I had never ran alone again. I mean, now I'm running alone. And when running with them, they said, stop with the 5Ks, the 10Ks. April called me up, as she has a lovingly way of saying it, being a wimp. And she said, you got to pick it up. And then started endurance running. Ran my first half marathon in Brooklyn and then started running more and more. And then in 2018, decided to run my first marathon and finished, and then ran my second in 2019 and hope to run my third in 2020. We want that 50th anniversary. That's all important to all of us. And now I fell in love. Harlem Run's like a second family. Now I have other groups that I've known because I'm a commissioner, whether it's, We Run Kings or Lean Strong Fast or Boogie Down Bronx Runners. I mean, there's an amazing running community out there. I know them, they know me, and now I'm just addicted. And to see them when we pass each other, ran with Nike for their moonshot this past marathon, just absolutely in love with the running community, how supportive they are. They're like a second family. And so now I'm addicted. But now running, it helps build the immune system. It's spiritual, it's mental, it's physical. Be out there in nature and just enjoying the breeze and the trees and seeing friends as I'm running. Even now, I cannot tell you, just seeing a friend that I haven't seen in 3 or 4 weeks just warms my heart. I saw Michael Caparasso from Roadrunners. I was just out there. It's like, oh my goodness, you don't realize seeing your friends, that little glance and just chatting from 12 feet away for a few minutes, it made my day. And I emailed Michael. I said, thank you. I was happy all day because I saw you, because now we're isolated. We're in places, where we're not seeing, we're seeing virtually, but not physically. And so that was special. So that's my story.
As you were talking, I was wondering this. Anecdotally, do you think that right now during this period, do you think more runners that maybe, 'cause, I mean, running is obviously a pretty solo activity, it more so than say basketball or something like that. Do you think people that tended to run solo are now running in groups in order to just have some sort of connection with people? Or do you think the opposite? Do you think that just people are kind of, because of the situation, they're not able to run in groups and that they're being a little bit more isolated than normal?
I don't see many people running in groups, and I encourage people, do not run in groups. You cannot run in groups.
Right.
You have to, at least if it's 2 by 2, we understand for safety reasons, particularly for women, if they don't want to be out there by themselves, run with someone, but do it at a distance. Do not run together. There's something we're discouraging. But I think people are getting it. Now they're running in Prospect Park, Central Park this week. People are social distancing. I'm running today. Won't say when, but I'm running today. And so I do actually go out to other parks. I was at McCarran, and I was also at Astoria, just to check out what's happening there on the track. And people there are also social distancing. But I think people now are getting it. They're running solo, unless for safety reasons they feel they cannot. But we do not encourage group runs at all. For now, solo run, or if you have to run with someone for safety reasons, do it at least 6 feet apart.
All right. As I mentioned to you yesterday, I don't want to make this entire podcast gloom and doom. What is new for the New York City Parks Department? Oh, I also would like to add that. So I grew up in New York City. I was born and raised in Bay Ridge, Brooklyn. My experience, I've been going to New York City parks my entire life, and for years and years and years, all New York City parks looked the same, and they were. I didn't notice at the time. The park was the park, right? But when you compare the parks of today to the parks of 5, 10, 20, 30 years ago, it's so different. They're so much nicer. They're so much cleaner. There's so much there's so much more available to kids that are trying to use them in terms of playgrounds and everything else. And so a lot of what you have done has really worked and has been a noticeable change for good in the New York City community. Again, when you have 8 million people kind of living on top of each other, the parks is such an important release for the residents of New York City. So firstly, congratulations on that. But secondly, can you tell me a little bit about what you have done since coming on to the New York City Parks Department, and then what you plan to be doing in the future?
Well, over the past 6 years since I've been here, we've completed well over 700 projects,
Wow.
Capital projects in parks. I have to thank the mayor. When I came in, he knew parks was a priority, and that's millions and millions of dollars spent. And we focused on underserved communities first. It was called a Community Parks Initiative.
Sure.
So the mayor gave me $318 million to really recreate and reimagine 67 parks that hadn't seen investment over 20 years. So that's the first major project. And so when you see some of the new play spaces, I'm a designer by trade. My background is in architecture. And so I'm working with my staff to reimagine how we design parks for the 21st century. And so now you'll see lower fences, with less asphalt and more play equipment and more what we call bioswales, or it's where you have more rain gardens within the park to capture stormwater. So more trees, more nature, even in playgrounds, because we want to be able to adapt to the 21st century. We also have an initiative called Parks Without Borders. We're now putting openings in certain parks. Prospect Park is one that's under construction right now, where now there's more access into the park, so people don't have to walk these long ways. If there's nature, let's get to it as quickly as possible. So we've done close to 100 of those projects throughout the city, providing more entrances to public spaces, lowering the fence so you can see in, it feels safer. And then we have Anchor Parks Initiative. These are one park per borough, $30 million. And what we're trying to do there is take an old park and make it new again. Everybody's seen the transformation in Central Park. So we said, rather than buy and create new parks, let's focus on some of the parks, these gems in our neighborhoods that could be recreated. Astoria Park was one of them. So the new track and field is a result of the Anchor Park Initiative. We're doing it in St. Mary's in the Bronx.
I live in Astoria. The Astoria track is gorgeous. It's one of the nicest tracks I've ever been on, for real.
Yes, so you're now seeing a benefit of it. That's part of our Anchor Park Initiative. And that second phase, once we get to it, we're going to finish all the paths, all the asphalt paths throughout the park. So now runners, walkers, bikers, strollers, people in wheelchairs can enjoy the park and the magnificent views. It's one of my favorite parks. You probably know it since you live nearby. Gorgeous views, gorgeous park, beautiful field, and we want to make sure we get to that pool too. So it's a real great project. And aside from that, what we're doing, Fountain of the Fairs in Flushing Meadows Corona Park is going to be the most gigantic water play feature right near the Unisphere. And I can go on and on and on. We right now have over 120 active construction projects throughout the city. And so we're trying to do it as quickly as possible. And so our goal is not just create parks, but places. I want to repeat that. Not just parks, but places, because different people experience parks different ways. Whether you're a toddler or you're a senior, we're rethinking how we design our parks for the 21st century.
It's fantastic. Again, you guys have done an amazing job, a noticeable job, in the last, 5-10 years, with again, just bettering the parks for us. I actually used to work for the City Parks Foundation, back when I was in college. I was one of the tennis instructors. And it was such an amazing program. And I look back on it now. It was honestly one of my favorite jobs that I've ever had. It was a great program that just provide. They do a lot of things, but my little aspect of it was I was a tennis instructor, and so we taught tennis all over New York City. In places, I lived in Brooklyn, so Brooklyn was like our borough. We separated into boroughs, and it was such an amazing thing. And the Parks Department, in corroboration with things like the City Parks Foundation, offer a tremendous amount of resources or just entertainment or just cultural value, either for free or for extremely cheap. And so a lot of what's going on inside New York City, again, you think about New York City as being this like millionaire's playground, but if you know where to look, and if you look toward the Parks Department, you look toward the City Parks Foundation, you look toward these other non-for-profit institutions, there's a lot being offered out there for New York City residents to, again, get extremely amazing cultural experiences.
And you raise a good point, because right now all of these organizations like the City Parks Foundation, CPF, and others, they're struggling right now. And I know after this pandemic is over, I just hope New Yorkers understand how important CPF and a lot of our other park partners, because right now galas and all the events where they make their revenue to provide those free services for the public is really going to be challenged. So that's something we're going to have to deal with. But on the positive side, because I want to make sure we stay upbeat and positive, New York and their park system is one of the best in the world. We get over 130 million visits. I'll repeat that. 130 million visits to our parks every year. And while everything is closed, movie theaters, bowling alleys, malls, parks remain open. And I want to really give kudos to our staff. We're an essential service. They're coming to work every day, making sure that parks are clean, the comfort stations are cleaned, so that people can come out to the one sanctuary of sanity where people can go during these very challenging times. So I just wanted to give them a shout out, as well as all of our partners, because the parks are open, and people are thanking me every single day and saying, please don't close the parks. I'm saying that's not in the forecast. We want to make sure people social distance, so it does not come to that. I don't think it will. But I do want to really thank our parks staff for really doing a yeoman's effort or your person's effort to keep our parks clean and safe for the public to enjoy.
As well as throughout the year, COVID-19 notwithstanding, the parks have improved dramatically. Again, as I said, over the last several years. So just they're doing a fantastic job just on a day-to-day basis.
I'll let them know. When I came on board, we have a whole analytics team that figured out how to maintain our parks on crews with mobile apps to optimize how we clean our parks. We have fixed posts who stay in the park, then we have mobile crews. And I have to give just kudos to the staff. It's amazing the technology that's behind making sure we have the proper routes, the techniques, the zone management. This is all behind the curtain stuff. But our goal is to make sure that people have a great experience in our parks. And because we know how important it is in New York, you cannot have a quality city without a great park system. And that's just it.
As somebody born and raised in New York City, what has it meant to you on a personal level to be in such an important position within the Parks Foundation and making such a difference?
For me, it's an honor. I mean, I never knew. I mean, I grew up next to Prospect Park. That's my backyard. And, seeing water really for the first time was the lake in Prospect Park, and walking through all parts of the hills and finding a cemetery. For us, it was just like a treasure hunt. But now to take a step back, and now I'm the commissioner of not just Prospect Park, but basically 30,000 acres of parkland. That's close to 2,000 parks. It's a bit overwhelming. And I remember coming back, a lot of people who knew my story, I'm a high school dropout, went to college, and now to come back to run the most amazing park system in the country is truly an honor. So I'm so addicted. I'm a planner by training, and I often say this. When I was appointed commissioner, one of the newspapers said ex-planner becomes parks commissioner. That kind of hurt, but and then all my friends in the planning circles kept saying, "How could you do this? How could you leave planning and go to parks?" And then I told them a story when I went back to see them at one of our conferences. You know something? When I cut a ribbon or open up a park, people literally hug me. No one ever hugged me for creating a master plan or a planning document. And so it shows the connection people have in New York. Everybody loves parks. There's something for everyone, from tennis to pickleball to hiking to running to biking to basketball to tennis. New York City is one giant playground. And that, to me, is why I think it is just so, so special. And now to be the commissioner of this incredible park system is truly an honor.
It's very well said. I think that's as good as a place as any to end it. But just to recap, so again, just you can use the parks, but keep your distance. When you're done doing whatever you're doing, get out of there. Does that apply for, like, do you recommend, people with kids, just if they could take a walk in the park, but just don't linger, you're saying?
Yes, yeah, you can walk, you can bike, you can stroll. We just discourage, and take a dog. We're discouraging people from really just lingering. We want them to get their exercise. Right. The bottom line is stay home.
Right.
You need to stay home so we can stop the spread. But if you have to exercise, go out, do your exercise, and then go home. That is really the ultimate message, because we know it helps dealing with this stay-at-home pause, but it also helps build the immune system by being outdoors. So we just encourage people, get your exercise, go home.
Well, Commissioner, thank you very much for your time. We really appreciate it. Hopefully, I'm registered for the New York City Marathon this year, so hopefully I'll be seeing you there at the starting line of the 50th anniversary of the greatest race in the world. Hopefully this event doesn't postpone us.
All right, now I know what you look like. When I'm running the loop and I see you, I'll just give a thumbs up.
Right. I'll give you a 6-foot high five, 6 feet away.
All right, there you go. All right.
All right, Commissioner, thank you again very, very much. I really appreciate it. You guys are doing an excellent job, not just in this situation, but just in general with the parks. Again, I've seen a noticeable increase in just the cleanliness and just the availability of the parks out there. It's been a real pleasure to be a part of this city and to have you at its leadership.
Timothy, thank you. It's been a pleasure.
All right, take care. Thank you very much. I appreciate it. And to all you out there listening in podcast land, I'm going to have links to New York City parks and the other things that the commissioner was referring to earlier. So if you have any questions, any things that you want to double check, make sure on this podcast, I'm gonna have links for it down in the show notes. And that's gonna do it for us. Thank you all very much for tuning in to the Personal Record Podcast on this very special episode with Mitchel Silver of the New York City Parks Department.